When creating a poster, there are some really important things to keep in mind. So let's take a look at this poster here. What can you tell me about this product? It's obviously a running shoe, and the title is Soul Power. That grabs our attention. But the overall color of green and the nature in there, maybe that's referring to getting out into nature and run around. Maybe this company is saying that making their shoes, they've made them in a way that's better for the environment. So a poster can tell you a lot just with a little bit of information. So what is this series of 3 posters saying? Really what I see is I see Lego blocks that when the shadow is something else, so in this case it's the ship. And so maybe it's talking about using your imagination with Lego, even though it's just these square blocks. Kids can use their imagination. This particular one works well because it's got a blue background, which makes it look like it's in the ocean. It wouldn't work if it was a red background. Also, in the bottom right corner, I see the word Lego, which wouldn't work with a red background either because my eye is drawn to that red in the bottom corner. So what I want to talk to you about is CARP, which stands for Contrast, Alignment, Repetition, and Proximity. Let's take a look at contrast. So contrast means you can contrast something. You can have something that looks different. One of the ways you can do that is to contrast the size of something. So our eyes are drawn to something that is bigger. So the bigger something is on your poster, the more your eye will be drawn to it. And our eyes also go from what's biggest to what's smallest, like in this example. You can also contrast color. So your eye is drawn to something which is a different color. And our eye is also drawn to something that is bright, like a yellow or a red or an orange. You can contrast shape. So if it's a different shape, our eye will be drawn to that shape. And we can contrast position. So if something looks like it's out of place, our eye gets drawn to that. So when I go back to this poster, the contrasting color of yellow, that bright color draws my attention. Also the red logo in the bottom corner draws my attention. There's also the contrast of shape. So the blocks, the Lego blocks are these brick shapes as well as the Lego logo, but that contrasts with a very smooth outline of the shadow of the T-Rex. And there's a contrast of position. Down in the bottom corner, the Lego brick, the Lego logo is shown, and that draws my eye there. The second principle is alignment. And so when things that line up, it just feels right to us. So let's take a look at this poster here. The alignment of the letters, on the right-hand side of the letters, they're all lined up. And then on the left-hand side, you have the letters, except for the K and the S and the U, are not lined up, but that line goes straight down to where the line of the jam is. And you'll also notice the smaller bit of text underneath is also lined up. Let's just quickly look at contrast. So our eye is drawn to what's big. So what's big? The text is big. Our eye is drawn to keep the sugar out. And the red of the out, our eye is drawn to that as well. And the white of the sugar cube that's trying to get into the jam, our eye is also drawn to that. And again, position of the logo in the bottom right corner, because it's out of place, our eye gets drawn to that. Repetition. So this is the third principle of design. And our brains, they really like repetition. And so we also, as you notice with these first few posters, we notice spaces as well as what is there. So our brains like repetition and they like patterns. So what you want to do is repeat something throughout your poster. Colors, fonts, shapes, space. Repeat that in different parts. So use the same font throughout your poster. Use the same shapes throughout your poster. Repeat something throughout. Let's look at this poster of all the Zs there. So the repetition are those Zs. You'll also notice alignment. All these Zs are lined up. And contrast, at the bottom you see something's changed. Nescafe, so that's a coffee. And that's in that bottom corner. And the Zs on the bottom line start to turn into at the N for Nescafe. So that contrast draws our attention. So it's, you're sleeping, but the Nescafe, the coffee, will wake you up. The fourth principle of design is proximity. This is how close or far objects are away from one another. And our brains have to work harder if related items are scattered over the page. So in this case, we have a poster here with information, but it's much better if you put the information that is related together. This is when this is happening, where is this happening, telephone number. So separate unrelated information, and space is just as important as content. So let's look at this example here. So the proximity, the letter A is close up towards to make the word peace, and it signified taking the A out of the war, so stopping war and having peace. You'll also, if we look back, contrast. So the red A, our eye is immediately drawn to that. It's also drawn to the white of the dove. And the alignment, the W and the R on the bottom, if you follow that line, they go over to the right where the United Nations is. And you'll also notice there's repetition. The same font is throughout the poster. Down on the bottom, that's the same font. It's just bigger up in the war and the peace letters. I also wanted to mention about pictures. So always choose high quality visuals. So download the biggest size image, because that's going to give you the best quality. Or, even better, create your own photos. Create a picture of a product on a white background. So here I've just put this product here on a chair and got some white paper, and I've used my device to take a picture. It's kind of dark because of that white background. It sees it so bright, so I can brighten that by holding my finger down on the screen and locking the exposure and dragging my finger up to make it brighter. So then there is the photo that I have. And I can use that in a poster. And what I've done here, how did I choose that color for the background? Well, I chose that color out of the ball. And I changed the tone a bit, the darkness and the brightness. And the same thing with the title. I've just made it a bit darker. So it still has that same color. Color is really important. Think about the fonts that you're using, because each font has a personality. Some are more silly than others. And you want the font to match your product or match your message. So these two different fonts say the same words, but they are very different. Which one would you want to send to somebody who's ill or sick? And when I'm mentioning text, I just also wanted to mention that left justified text is much easier to read. We don't center our text because it's much harder to read in big chunks. When you read through a book, or you've noticed in all the posters now, we don't have centered text because it messes up our alignment. So either left justify it or right justify it. You'll notice those both examples in that you'll see here, but generally it's left justified. And you want to think, when you think about colors, think about a maximum of 3 colors. I would much rather prefer that you pick a color and then you change that color either darker or lighter. You can do that quite easily. And also think about what those colors represent. So red can represent many things, including love, or it could be danger, like a stop sign. Orange can represent attention or enthusiasm, excitement, energy. Oftentimes we think about the sun and we think about yellow as being this happy, cheerful, or bright color, and green, nature, peace. Also sometimes they say, green can represent jealousy. And blue, well, again, blue is maybe a nature color, but it also can represent sadness. And purple is often like a wisdom, like the wizard with the purple robes, or the king or the queen that is royalty. So remember the CARP principles of contrast, alignment, repetition, and proximity. And let's take a look at this example here. So the contrast, this white of the screen, this wouldn't work as well as if the background was white as well. So they've actually chosen a yellow, off yellow. They've chosen that yellow because of the yellow arm of the crash test dummy. So that's not a random choice. There's a contrast of the bright colors of the eBay letters, so those stand out and grab my attention. And the contrast of the position when inspiration strikes at the bottom, that is off to the side, so that position draws our attention. And you'll also notice the contrast of the smaller text underneath, Shop Our App, to when inspiration strikes. It's the same font, it's just a different size. Alignment, so the center of the message here of eBay, that goes, if you follow that down, it goes right to where the when inspiration strikes is there. And again, think about that left justified alignment. The repetition of the color yellow throughout. If you look at the what's on the screen, it's a helmet, but it has a yellow chin strap. That was purposely decided on. They wouldn't use a different color like blue or green. That they wanted that consistency. That's repeated. Proximity, we've already talked about that with the text down on the bottom, so that draws our attention. And also think about the wording of this slogan. There's not a lot of text in here. None of these posters have tons of text for you to read. The wording is deliberate. When inspiration strikes, you think about a crash test dummy, what it does is it strikes into something. So that's very deliberate. Take a look at this poster. You may notice this is a poster for adopting a dog, and you may see the outline of the dog. Think about what of the CARP principles you can see in this poster. I also wanted to mention logos. So you might not recognize this logo. This is actually Amazon.com's logo. It used to be, when it first opened up, was just a bookstore. That's all it sold was books. And so I don't know why they chose sort of like, it looks like water or a pool or maybe a pathway, but an A. They had their choices. And in 1998, they changed to this. And then recently, this is the most recent one. This is the newest logo. It's really, really clever. You'll notice the yellow that draws our attention, and it creates a smile. But it also is an arrow, so everything from A to Z. So you say everything from A to Z and you're done. So it's a very clever logo. When you look at this logo, this is Baskin-Robbins. Again, they've just used two colors. And the B and the R, if you look at the pink in the B and the R, that forms 31. Baskin-Robbins is famous for having 31 flavors. Federal Express is another logo that has a history. So this is their first logo. And in some countries, federal had a bad connotation. It sort of could signify overbearing government or maybe oppression. So they changed it. People would say FedEx. So here they say, I can FedEx you something. The new colors are very recognizable, as is the font. And you'll notice in between the E and the X in the white space, there is an arrow there. And that's what FedEx does. They take things from one place to another. So when you're designing your poster, think about CARP, think about colors, think about what you can do to grab your viewers' attention.